You watch an animal mature from egg to animal and go, whoa, that's a hell of an algorithm that generated that thing. You go back to the very beginning, like, what was the algorithm in that egg? The very rough version of my argument is if you step back and look at the history of life on Earth in time lapse, it actually looks more than you might think like the development of a single organism, as if we are building a planetary superorganism.
I looked through your book, Why Buddhism is True, and I found it very interesting what you say about perception.
When we perceive the world, we impose all these essences on things. Friend, enemy, good person, bad person. Meditation can erode some of these cognitive biases. And I think AI really crystallizes the challenge.
What would you, as an academic, maybe recommend that these big superpowers do about AI?
Well, first of all, I would say
So with that important question out of the way, let's get on to something a little bit less serious, which is morality and evolution. So I do philosophy, so I'm particularly interested in your writings in The Moral Animal. So I wanted, just for our listeners, before we get into a bit of discussion about the key points, could you just explain both the genesis and what you see as the nature of human morality as it relates to evolution? So why it comes about and what sorts of things are at the base of it that structure our morality?
Well, I think that you can't really understand human morality and human moral impulses and intuitions without understanding the dynamics of human evolution. One of the courses I actually taught here at Princeton was I co-taught a graduate seminar with Peter Singer. I'm sure you're familiar with him, called The Nature of Ethics. It was about the biological basis of moral intuition. We were exploring that question. And I think that, some kind of theoretical developments in evolutionary biology that took place in the 60s and 70s, some kind of theoretical refinements of the basic theory of natural selection, you might say, many of which they're kind of covered in Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene, although he didn't apply them to human beings much in that book. But I think when you think about how those things do apply to the evolution of human psychology, you can understand our moral intuitions, and for that matter, the whole human predicament a lot more clearly.
It's interesting you bring up Peter Singer, actually, and you said, I'm sure you know him, because we hosted him in Oxford for an episode. And interestingly, we actually got a little bit into evolutionary biology as it relates to morality, because his argument for, and I just wanted to see what you might think about this. His argument for universal or objective moral values was precisely that evolution can't account for what we call universal benevolence. So not just benevolence towards our tribe, people who look like us, think like us, are on our team, but sort of this seemingly universal moral idea which comes about in all societies, that we should promote good for people, happiness, fulfillment, etc., and not suffering. And that this idea of universal benevolence, having it for everyone, not being able to be explained by evolution, might be something more like the recognition of an objective moral value.
Yeah, he wrote a book called The Expanding Circle a long time ago about the fact that, whereas I think he put it this way, this was one of his examples, but there was a time when members of one ancient Greek city-state, well, they didn't call it ancient back then, of course, but when one Greek city-state would consider people in another Greek city-state subhuman, enslave them, kill them. And then they had this moral epiphany and decided that all Greeks are humans. It's just the Persians who aren't humans, and so on. In fact, supposedly Aristotle counseled Alexander the Great, whom he tutored as a child, to treat Greeks as though they were kin, but non-Greeks as though they were, quote, plants or animals. That was in, I think, Plutarch's biography of Alexander the Great. And then, and as Peter points out, now in the modern world, we at least feel you should say that people of all races, creeds, and colors deserve to be treated decently and have basic rights. Of course, we sometimes honor that in the breach and don't really comply with it, but at least it's something that is said, and that's an advance. And sometimes we do comply with it and try to comply with it. And so anyway, Peter, it's funny. Peter has one explanation for that expansion of the moral circle in that book, and I think there's some truth to that. And I have a different and possibly complementary one in my book, Non-Zero. What I emphasize is that as human social evolution has proceeded and cultural evolution kind of since hunter-gatherer days, people have found themselves in non-zero sum relationships with more and more people at greater and greater distances. And that, as a practical matter, when you're interdependent with someone, when you're playing a possible win-win game with them, whether because of economic exchange or you have some other common interest, or maybe you're uniting with them against some common enemy, all those things encourage you to treat them decently. And I think that's part of the dynamic, is the expansion of non-zero sum dynamics that have kind of culminated in globalization. And if all goes well, will further culminate in the development of a true global community, which is, I think, urgently needed right now and hasn't really happened. Peter's explanation in The Expanding Circle is more about our kind of having an intuition that, and I, repeat this at great peril because I'll probably get it wrong, but the idea is that evolution does give us a kind of a tit for tat instinct that, good deeds should be punished, bad deeds should be rewarded, that you have to justify the bad things you want to do to other people or the good things you want for yourself through some kind of argument about what is more generally deserved. I think he, as I recall, says we do begin with that kind of core intuition, but we don't naturally apply it, say, beyond the village or beyond the tribe or whatever, and that's what takes work. And he would stress the intellectual work, the sheer, application of reason to the basic core instinct. But anyway, for whatever reason, this has happened. And, I guess in general, the good news about human evolution is it left us with instincts and impulses that, although designed to be used sometimes at the expense of others and in the service of our own, genetic proliferation, at least as that imperative was defined during evolution, that these impulses and instincts we can build on, sometimes by just using reason to come closer to something that deserves the term moral truth.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. I just wanted to drop you in a word from our sponsor Manscaped. You can use the discount code LOAF to get your discount, because even a lion needs to tame its mane.
Get the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra from Manscaped now. Stay fresh with no cuts, so that your baguette leaves no crumbs.